Hello, I'm autopsy technician Ercan Duman. Today, I'm going to tell you about my interesting autopsy memories that you haven't heard before.
Can you return to normal life after autopsy, for example, such as eating, drinking tea, drinking coffee?
She had been killed by her husband, decapitated, parts of her body passed through a meat grinder. That was really strange and horrible.
Have you ever encountered a different material when the corpse was opened?
Inmates in prison often cut the razor in half and swallow it to get to the hospital. Some of them did not pass through the throat, and because of that, they are dying in that way.
Welcome to our underground. I am Muhammed Bahçıcık. This week, we will look at a different topic. Actually, we will shoot someone who is an autopsy assistant, but this person has a difference. Imagine you're a 21-year-old teenager. You have a scalpel and a corpse in front of you. You have to understand why that body died. Think of all your professional experience, the books you have read, and what your teachers have told you. And to understand the cause of death, you need to create a report. You are 21 years old, you are actually inexperienced, but you will gain experience now. All of you are welcome to our video again. Now, we are moving on to our interview.
My name is Ercan Duran, I am 21. I was born in Sivas. I graduated from the autopsy assistant program at university. I did my internship at one of the biggest hospitals. I really wanted to be a soldier. I won military school. I couldn't go, then I didn't think of it. My brother said that at least go to a two-year university, then I saw here. I'm very happy right now.
What is an autopsy worker and what does he do?
Forensic deaths. In other words, are the actions taken to eliminate suspicious deaths. We can say that these are the procedures carried out to examine and conclude deaths in the style of suicide, murder, etc. The autopsy officer is the assistant personnel who are ready to assist the specialist physician performs the autopsy.
Has there ever been a death that you have never forgotten?
An elder came. At first, she had a very intense rose scent. Me and my internship friend were very surprised. We thought that first she died and she was washed. After that, they buried her because the prosecutor's office wanted an autopsy again. My friend couldn't stand it and said that there was such a situation. There's a very intense smell of roses. Has she been washed? He asked. No such thing did not happen. She was brought straight from the hospital, they said. It was a death that never left my mind.
At what age did you start your career exactly?
I started my research at the age of 17. I used to read books and watch movies about autopsy. I started this kind of thing at the age of 18, directly from school to university. I saw my first body from the first week in the school.
In the first week?
Exactly.
How did you feel when you saw the first funeral?
We can say excitement. There was also the fear that I wouldn't be able to do it. But thankfully, we got through it all.
How does being a 21-year-old autopsy assistant make you feel different from your peers?
Life is starting to make more sense because I'm one of the best predictors of what will happen tomorrow. While my other friends can break the hearts of his family with their age, I have already overcome this. I always try to please their hearts. I try to be nice to be my friends and people. I can say that is in my mind at every moment, and I'm watching my feet accordingly. Made me a better person.
Have you ever seen any strange or different moments?
In fact, everything is starting to feel normal to us now. But there's a moment I can say. I think they want to kill the groom at the wedding. Two people killed the man, one from the front and one from the right. Everybody there thinks he was killed from the front. They're going to the autopsy. They see that the bullet entering from the front has entered under the heart and has not hit the heart. The blood from the right side shattered his lungs and heart and died with that bullet. In this, both the murder suspect has changed and the punishments too. It was very interesting for me. There's also another story. We encountered a murder disguised as a suicide. First, they shot the man, then they put him in the car and threw him over the barriers. The car exploded and inside of it burned too. Many people there saw it as a suicide, but in this autopsy, we noticed that the bullet hole and traces of them and determined that it was a murder.
Can you return to normal life after autopsy, for example, such as eating, drinking tea, drinking coffee?
Since we are so used to autopsy, they seem like a normal thing to us now. Right after that, we can smoke our cigarettes, drink our tea, and eat. I just couldn't eat once. While I was studying at university,
There were two one-week-old deaths. They had an incredible rotten smell. While I was still under the influence of that smell, a meat meal came out in the cafeteria. I felt its nerves in my mouth. I couldn't eat it. That was my only problem.
So, what's the weirdest autopsy report you have ever found?
There was something like this. Again, a murder of a woman, unfortunately. A woman killed by her husband. The number of knives stabbed multiple times is in the double digits.
How much, for example, on average?
More than 30.
More than 30?
Yes, we were so sad. The woman had defensive cuts on her hands and arms.
Can we open this? What is it that we call a defensive cut?
So, when the person swings the knife, the person who will be stabbed holds their hands like this to avoid being stabbed. This knife either cuts hands or cuts arms that way. These are the defensive cuts. There was an incredible amount of blood draining from her body as there were so many stab wounds. There wasn't much blood left. This was a strange occurrence. Unfortunately, another incident was a murder of a woman again. She had been killed by her husband, decapitated, parts of her body passed through a meat grinder. That was really strange and horrible.
How long does an autopsy take, and how long was the longest autopsy?
Normal autopsies take between 45 minutes and 1.5 hours. It can take up to 3 hours, sometimes up to 3.5 hours. I had a 3.5 hour autopsy while I was doing my internship. Long-term autopsies are performed on prisoners who die in prison to see if they were tortured or not, and to protect the rights of both the prisoner and the guards there. That's the main reason why these autopsies are done much more detailed, and it describes why they are so hard.
How did you feel when you went into your first autopsy?
Excitement. I was so excited. Can I or can I not? I had a fear of it. But I said to myself, Ercan, you chose this place. You came here despite everyone. You won this place. You are going to do it, whether you want or not. I'm glad I did it.
What did your parents say when they heard you were going to be an autopsy worker?
Of course, they didn't want me to be. They said, it's a dirty job. You feel uncomfortable. You can't handle it. You'll be afraid and you're going to feel sad about it. But there's something in me when you tell me not to do anything. I will do it out of spite. Because of this, I chose this. I'm glad that I chose it. Now everyone is pleased, also they are happy and convinced.
What's the things you don't like in this job?
The funeral's relatives. Because the situations that affect people most deeply are usually the dead's relatives. For example, in the morning, the girl is arguing with her father. Her father leaves the house. Father dies in traffic accident. The girl had cried for a half an hour, clung to her father's throat, like, my father, my father. There are situations that affect people very deeply, and I am deeply affected.
Have you ever encountered a different material when the corpse was opened?
No, I never seen anything like that before. But as someone has told us, inmates in prison often cut the razor in half and swallow it to get to the hospital. Some of them did not pass through the throat, and because of that, they are dying in that way.
How do you deal with the heavy smells?
Some of our friends wear double-layer masks, 3-layer masks. Some apply cream to their nostrils. At first, I was wearing a double mask because it was unbearable. The smell is not something we can describe. If a rotten corpse only had a certain smell, you would inevitably get used to it. But each time it smells more different and intense. Smells in a way we haven't smelled before. It just gets more and more annoying. You have to get used to it somehow. Now, I can do my job easily with a single-layer mask.
Sometimes a funeral comes. It smells heavy. Sometimes comes another, but it smells is not that much. Have you ever had a funeral that smelled so heavy, waited too long, stayed outside for days?
In general, it smells very much, or rather from experience, forgive me if I'm wrong, 1 week and 15-20 day funerals stink unbelievably. I looked at the autopsy of the 1 week old funeral. I also looked at the autopsy of the 3 month old body. 3 month old body was warm but wasn't stinking like the 1 week old. After it started to rot, there were small worms due to such bacteria, but the dead were mummified by itself and there was no smell. There was a smell, but not too much to bother, to be honest.
Can we open a little bit about the funeral that came to 3 months later? How was the autopsy? What did you encounter? Where did the worms and bacteria in it feel mostly? Was the corpse standing whole? Did worms eat some of it, or did those parts still exist?
90-95% of the internal organs were rotten. It wasn't even rotten, it was gone. Their skins were peeled off. The worms were unbelievably numerous. Even when you took the worms and shook them sideways, they were still coming back to the dead.
When you open the corpse's internal organs, like the heart parts,
the heart was gone. Worms ate most of it. There was no tissue to sample, we could only take samples from bone tissues.
What about the eyes and other organs?
They had already completely disappeared. He had a denture on his mouth left only.
How was the skin looking like?
There's nothing I can describe, like mummified and strange. You just need to see it and touch it to feel it, in my opinion.
Which organ in the body do you find the strangest?
I think it's the brain because it's neither soggy nor too rigid. It has an incredible texture. I mean, how can I describe it? When you take it in your hand, it's like cotton, but like a heavy cotton. It's a soft, very nice organ in my opinion. It has an average weight of 1 kilogram and 750 grams.
What is the wound types?
We have 4 types of wounds: mechanical wounds, physical wounds, chemical and biological wounds. These are separated among themselves. Mechanical wounds are like stab wounds made by knife or etc. We can say any type of sharp object injuries. Also, we can say crushing injuries and gunshot injuries too. Physical wounds are such as electric shock, frostbite, burns. We can classify chemical wounds as acid-based wounds. In biological wounds, we can say wounds such as scorpion bites and snake bites.
What do you look in autopsy?
At the autopsy, 3 spaces are opened as a procedure. These 3 cavities are the head, thorax and abdomen. Would you like me to describe the autopsy?
Of course, of course.
Well, let me start with the head. The scalp opens from the ears in the form of an arc. With our hands, the skin of the head is lowered face to face. Then, the skull is opened with some kind of saw. The brain and the brain organs are removed from it. Then, a straight incision is made starting from the bottom of the chin and forming an arc in the navel up to the genitals. Chest organs are removed one by one. Abdominal organs are removed and examined. Samples are taken one by one from each of them and sent to the necessary laboratories. In this way, blood, intraocular and urinary fluids are taken.
When the corpse comes to you, have you ever seen any feces left in it?
After a person dies, it slowly starts to let itself go, because all its muscles are bankrupt. There can be a small leakage of feces, but it's generally stuck in the intestines. Of course, it does not appear on all corpses.
Can an autopsy worker murder without leaving a trace?
No, I can say this very clearly. Let's say he's an expert, knows all the techniques, maybe he can clean the marks on the body. But technology has advanced tremendously, as we all know. This has nothing to do with the autopsy. There are cameras, phone recordings, HTS recordings, etc. Even the smallest fingerprint on the body or somewhere can easily reveal who the killer is.
Have you ever autopsied the body, which was removed from the grave after a lot of months or years?
Well, I've never had the opportunity to do it this way. Except for me, I can say that everyone in my class had this opportunity. We even call it exhumation. After burial, it is removed from the grave and autopsy is performed at the request of the prosecutor or the family's request. This usually happens in inheritance cases. There may be a suspicion of murder.
Well, after the funeral comes out of the grave, 20 years later, 30 years later, or 10 years later, 5 years later, what is left? What do you examine?
Only the skeleton remains. Because all the muscle, tissue, skin, all the other organs have rotted and mixed with the soil, we can only take samples from bone. Compared to the other autopsies, we are much less likely to get results, but still there are results. Also want to add, when the grave is exhumed on suspicion of poisoning, by taking samples from both the corpse and the soil in which he was buried and compared in the lab, we check for the poison in it.
Have you ever done any pediatric autopsy?
Yes, unfortunately I say yes. You just ask what is one of the parts of your profession that you dislike the most. This is one of them. I can put this at the beginning. Because children are innocent, they don't know anything, they're always good inside. Seeing the children dead on the table both makes me shudder and saddens me a lot.
How do you know if someone shot in the head is a murder or a suicide?
It depends on the type of wound. Firearm injuries are also divided into 4. Contagious shot, closer than contagious shot, close shot and far shot. Contagious and near contagious shots are generally considered suicides. Close and far shots are definitely murder. Because a human arm is not enough to shot it on his own head from a distance. How we understand it in long-barreled weapon is, both the length of the weapon is measured and the arm length of the deceased is measured. If it's close to arm's length or longer, we say that there is no possibility of self-killing.
How do you tell the difference between a bullet that enters the head closely and a bullet that enters the head from afar? Does it look bigger or smaller?
The hole sizes are the same, but the damage it leaves is different. This is how we usually understand when we take it to autopsy.
For example, Does the bullet stay in the brain when the skull is opened, or does it pierce the brain and come out?
In some cases, the bullet can stay in the brain because it pierces the skull, and in some cases, it directly pierces. We can also see the exit hole.
How about the exit hole?
Although there is not much difference in short-barreled weapons, the entrance and exit holes are almost the same. However, when there's a direct hit to the head with long-barreled weapons, unfortunately, the integrity of the head is broken.
How do you understand people who die from lack of oxygen?
In other words, let me even say this, we call asphyxia to deaths due to lack of oxygen. This is also divided into various groups within itself, but I'll tell you what I know. Drowning, hanging, suicide. These are the ones that come to my mind right now. We are investigating whether he was killed by drowning or was thrown into the water alive. To understand, we look directly his lungs. We look at the tubular organs, the trachea, and even the freshwater and saltwater distinctions are made. Even in suicides made by hanging, it is checked whether the hydroid and thyroid bones in the neck organs are broken. In order to get the right result, we conduct research and examinations in this way.
So, do you recommend this job or not?
One must first know oneself. I see that there are people who text me too. Ladies and young children says, I'm afraid of blood, but I want to be an autopsy worker. Someone says, I can't stand the smell, but I want to work there too. If you can stand 4 hours like this, 4, 5, 6 hours, work in heavy smells, be in dirty environments, if you can stand it, yes, you are for this job. But I would also like to say that, during these times, consider the situation of being unemployed.
What is that to you?
For me, that is a bliss, to love people, to be a good person, to treat people respectfully. Not to make people sad, that's all I'm going to say, because every time death comes to mind, that person tries to be a better person than she can be, tries to be a better child, a good friend. He won't be a bad person because he knows that when he dies, he will be held accountable in some way whether he believes in God or not. That's why my advice to everyone is, it doesn't need to be on your mind all the time, but at a certain time, think about death. It gives peace to you, be sure of it.